All right. All right, good afternoon, everyone. I know. I'll whistle, but it hurts. All right, thanks everybody for coming today. Sorry for starting a little late. Just start off with some good news. We'll be replacing Sandra Lohman's position hopefully August 1st. Some administrative functions will come back to the LED sooner than later, I hope. Thanks to everybody for patience while we get through this transition of switching administrative assistants. You never know how good you have it until it's gone. That phrase, you heard that before, and I'm living that right now. So, again, thanks everybody for your patience. Sandra was a great asset to the division, and she did a lot of things that I'm not very good at. So, I'm limping my way through it, and I really appreciate everybody's patience. So, thanks again for coming to the second. Since the second was canceled, this was the official second working group meeting for rules this year. As we start, we'll introduce ourselves and tell us who you are and who you represent. Of course, Patrick Maroney with Liquor Enforcement, and I'll go to my right.
Alan Call from the Attorney General's Office.
Doug Caskey, Colorado Wine Industry Development Board.
Alan Steen, Southern Glaciers Wine and Spirits.
Mickey Hackenberger, Wine and Spirits Wholesalers in Colorado.
Jim Spall, Appledeck Wine and Spirits.
Jennifer Turner, Distilled Spirits Council.
Stephen Gould, Colorado Distillers Guild. Eric Foster, Colorado Cider Guild.
Lisa Crawford, Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, representing Community Prevention.
Jeff Penn, representing the Lake Forest.
Steve Finley, Colorado Beer Distributors Association.
Larry Hudson, Safeway.
Go.
Chad Hunter, Long-Term Profit.
Andrew Skills Aldana, Colorado Brewers Guild.
Daniel Muley, Cricket Save Arson Beer Project.
Karen Forthman, Anheuser-Busch.
Gene McAvoy, Colorado Licensed Beverage Association.
Mary Lou Chapman, Rocky Mountain Food Industry Association.
Corey Amen, Deputy Senior Director of Enforcement for DOR.
Jake Baus, Liquor Enforcement.
And when the back there, the public area, well,
Tony
yeah.
Ryerson, Applejack Wine and Spirits.
Sean Rossi, Bunny Ray Liquor.
Chris Lobby, Periodic Brewing, representing brew pubs.
Tootsie Breeze, 7-Eleven and Circle K.
Bill Hayes, Target. Michael Steppitt, Wine and Spirit Wholesalers of Colorado.
Brock Hersberg, Wine Institute.
Amy Hicks, Wax Store.
Sherry Johnson, Senate.
Kristen Weaver, Boulder County Government.
Matt Schechter, United Food and Commercial Workers, Local 7.
Dylan Pepper, Support Your Local Liquor Store.
Jerry Maneri, Department of Revenue.
Cindy Carr, Department of Revenue.
There's Snell, Department of Revenue.
Thank you, everybody, and I'd like to recognize Senator John. Thank you for coming today. As the rulemaking process is something that it's always good to see how things go on at our level here, so thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. So, again, today's the official rulemaking working group. So comments are left to the working group. At the end, there will be a time for public comment. Limited to 2 minutes per person. Unless we need more, then we can give more if needed. So with that, we'll start. Over the last couple months, we have had subgroup meetings from trade practices, deliveries, lodge and entertainment, and then statutory changes. What I'd like to do is take a few minutes to get an update from those subgroups to find out where those subgroups are and where they're headed and the time frame of getting things completed with that. Depending upon how long that will take, we'll take a break or not, and then we'll go into the document that I sent out on Friday with the agenda here. It's the next section talking about what changes from Senate Bill 18243 we're going to make as well. Now, the changes I have in the bulletin we sent out really just is a subject matter, does not have draft language yet. We're hoping, I know we are going to have draft rules in the next couple weeks, for sure, on some of these other ones even sooner. So really today I see as just a catch up and say, where is everybody at? Answer questions. I know there's some out there. I've already received a few emails and phone calls after Friday's email, so glad to answer any of those questions and make sure everybody's on the same page. So with that, we'll just start in. So the first subgroup is the trade practices. So the trade practice subgroup, which I chaired, we've had 2 meetings since the last main group. The first one was on June 6th, and the second one was July 9th. During those meetings, samples were brought to the table of different trade practice laws across the country from Ohio, California, a survey from the National Conference of State Liquor Administrators, and others. I think we're making some good headway, and I'd like to get comments from those who attended from the working group here. We're ready to give some draft language by the end of next week. We'll give you a few days to look at before our next meeting, which is going to be held August 8th. The main issue within trade practice we're looking at is, of course, value of labor. That's probably the most difficult and the hottest topic right now and within that group. The value of labor, trying to define what labor is allowed and not allowed between a wholesaler and retailer. We also talked about changing a little bit of the definition of items sold from a wholesaler to a retailer to be fair market value versus the current rule of cost. And then the third one is marrying the language for off-premises consumer sampling with on-premises consumer sampling, of how it's actually facilitated with invoicing. So those are the three things that we're really talked about. So I open the floor to the discussion with that.
Thank you, Patrick.
Yes.
Nikki Hackenberger, Wine and Spirit Wholesalers of Colorado. I know we had quite a discussion on the value of labor at our last meeting and whether we should define value of labor and merchandising separately, and it sounded like we kind of decided not to define merchandising, or that you indicated you didn't want to do that. But we had a board meeting, and we've actually sent out some information to our members on it, and we got very, very clear direction that they really wanted us to come back to the group and be very specific that we want to define what we can and can't do, and that value of labor is really should be defined. Allowable things should be anything that is defined as building the brand, meaning the product, bringing it to the front of the shelf, creating the point of sale display, but not things like mopping and sweeping, and absolutely no running of motorized equipment. We have had requests from a very large retailer that our people actually operate a forklift and motorized pallet jacks inside the store and things like that are causing a lot of concern for safety reasons and such. And we had some pretty specific things, putting up the shelf toppers and things like that are all fine. But there are a lot of requests that simply go beyond actually bringing the product in from delivery. There is some concern too about some of the new remote warehouses that are in very close proximity to the actual retail store. Our understanding is we deliver it, and if we deliver to a remote warehouse, that's it, we deliver it there. We cannot pick up and deliver any from that second warehouse and then take it into the store. So it just re-emphasized how important it is that we create a definition of what we can and can't do. And Alan, you were at the meeting, and I'm sure I'm kind of doing more of a glossing over as opposed to getting down into the real specifics.
I don't think I have anything to add though at this point. Covers it pretty close.
Yeah, Mickey, we've had a couple meetings since the last meeting internally where we discussed, and I think we have decided to get a little more specific on those can and cannots.
Right.
Because of that very reason. I think there's so many, we may not cover everything specifically, but I think we're going more broadly than just stocking and moving product, because I think it does, we've had a chance to look at all the information that was submitted, and I would agree that we need to be more specific. I think it just would do the industry better by giving that information.
Our people were also very, they were fine with limiting it to a specific, 3 days a week. But the problem, they agreed, is that's very difficult to enforce. While each of our people would know if they had folks out 3 days a week, it would be very hard for revenue to actually enforce that, and there would probably require a lot of regular keepers and such.
Right.
So if we can just limit what we can and can't do.
Okay,
But
Jim?
if you define it as building the brand, I thought one of the wholesalers' concerns was that Kroger and or Safeway and or Walmart are gonna require you to be there every day to build on displays. And do you consider that building the brand?
We certainly do not want to be there every single day. We think that is, egregious, that's not, reasonable to expect people to be there every single day to make sure that all of the product is moved to the front of the shelf. We think that that is not reasonable. We should be able to bring the product in, sit it on the floor, make sure the shelves, are displaying the product, or if you're doing a point of sale display there, put the shelf talkers on. But if you're talking about being there every single day to make sure all of the bottles are moved to the front, every single day, no, I don't think that's reasonable.
That's fine with me, but I'm just saying, again, if you deal with definition like building the brand, it becomes an amorphous term that,
Well, I don't think we would put that in regs.
no, I understand,
yeah.
but, so, do you bring it to the, I'm just trying to understand, because this goes back to my question for last meeting, which is, or my statement, which is maybe what you do is that all you do is drop and go. And
We'll do that.
I'm okay with that. If you wanna level playing
No,
field.
hold on,
Steve's
hold on.
okay with that.
No, Steve, this Steve was next, hold on.
Okay.
Okay,
Done.
yeah.
The other balls.
So, sorry. So our position is the distillers of Colorado. You know, the downside is that the big brands can bring in people that can merchandise, and most of the small brands can't. But what we've talked about this, and really what we feel is that we wanna be able to, if the opportunity presents itself, to walk into, say, Jim's store and at least make the shelf look good. We'll reach out and say, you know, it needs to be restocked. We don't wanna have to do that, but we'd like the option to do that without breaking the law, if that makes sense.
It does,
Um,
it does,
And
So-
that is a good point.
it does. Is that something, and we're looking at trying to get some good language that would be solid there, but is that, having some kind of language that you may not require, still just a slippery slope? I'm asking that
No,
from,
I think-
I'm asking from your point of view, not from my point of view, from your point of view. Okay, they're not requiring, they're asking, but you know, behind the scenes, they really are required.
And that's how you have to word it carefully.
Right.
You know, I think a lot of what Mickey said makes absolute sense. I think there needs to be some sort of cap on how frequently either a manufacturer or a wholesaler personnel, are in there doing facing work, et cetera.
And just curious, just from your standpoint, from the Distillers Guild, but put you on the spot here, how many days a week would seem reasonable? I'm just thinking like straw poll, I mean, from you.
Most of our brands are small brands.
Right.
There's one or two that could probably put people out there pretty heavy. The Distilled Spirits Council's members have a lot deeper pockets than we do, and they do put people in the market, in other markets, full-time in some stores. I'm not even sure that I'm comfortable saying a
Yeah,
limit.
I understand.
It needs to be a happy medium that works for big brands, small brands, and wholesalers. You know, it's gotta be a win-win for all of us.
Gotcha.
You know, we're never gonna get a perfectly level playing field, because everybody, the big brands are always gonna have deeper pockets than we do. But I'd hate to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say that a brand like mine can't walk into Applejack's and after a busy weekend, you know, either ask permission, go get a case, refill one SKU and face it.
Yeah.
I don't wanna have to do that, but, I mean, I'd love to help doing that, or have the option to do so.
Well, that helps both the wholesaler and the retailer, you know.
And a lot of
in
our
your
brands
members.
aren't gonna be able to do that, and, you know, there are retailers like Jim that really support the smaller brands, and we appreciate that, but we still, you know, if the opportunity presents itself, yeah. I mean, everything that can help us sell a bottle, we wanna do, as long as it isn't something that's gonna sub-optimize somebody else in the community.
Okay, good. Steve?
Yeah, I agree with Vicky, pretty much what Vicky said. We've had that discussion this morning about whether to, you know, leave it at just, you know, define stocking, or to do all the do's and don'ts, and we're coming down on the side, if we wanna spell it out. I mean, you know, it'd be a little more cumbersome, but, I think we do need to spell out what you can and can't do. And then as far as the frequency, we had that discussion as well. Our guys say they already do that now, as far as keeping track of delivery. Like, if they were audited today, they could tell you how many times they were in each store, so, that's something we already do now. So if you want, when it comes to the frequency, if you to look at, you know, to enforce it,
Right.
You can go back and audit, we do that now already.
But you want to.
Are there either, I'm sorry, are there from the beer side or from the wine and spirit side, because I don't know, situations today where you will see a rep 7 days a week in a retail outlet? I won't hold you to it, but I'm trying to, the same one, not a rep, you know, the same product in a retailer 7 days a week.
A rep or delivery?
Either-
Delivery, they're not 7 days a week, but yeah, we'll get requests for close to 7 days a week, for
Alright.
some, yes.
All right. Who's over here? Andres.
I would just say the direction that you're going, I think is really, really helpful, because from a brewer skill perspective, it's very difficult for us to kind of determine what the impact is gonna be on our smallest members versus our biggest members if we don't know exactly what is stocking, what isn't stocking, what is
Right.
permitted, what isn't permitted. Perspective that we're taking is, once we know what those definitions are, let's assume the worst case. Let's assume that, for example, someone has decided what is actually permissible, and then it requires you to come in as much as possible to do that servicing. From our perspective, let's look at the smallest business first, see if that requires us to hire 1, 2, 3, 4 more additional people, and then decide if that's worth it or not to work at that retailer. So by going by this approach, I think that's really helpful for us
Okay.
in kind of just kind of deciding that.
All right. Gene?
I think it's going to be difficult, not impossible, but it will be challenging to determine frequency, because what is frequent in Applejack may not be frequent in Bonnie Bray or Mayfair because of the size differential. And I'm not saying it's wrong. I certainly am not denigrating anybody's success, but I think that you're gonna be hard pressed to determine frequency. And I think that might be almost impossible.
Yeah, I know.
Because it's tough.
And I'm asking to get to that answer. You know, I'm asking how many think we, not, because I agree with you. I think a given number is gonna be tough. And what number do you choose? And we haven't really decided where to go, but we see the challenges with coming up with a number. That's why I'm asking these questions, you know, how often do they go right now? What's the max you see?
It depends.
You know, and I know it depends, you know, you got some in rural that may see every other week, you know, and then you see some metro every single day, so, yeah, I understand. Karen?
I have to agree with Gene. I think to set an arbitrary limit on frequency is hard to do. If you have a retailer that's figured it out and is selling a hell of a lot of product, to come in and tell them that they can't restock because they had a good day, it hurts them, it hurts the whole system, so I don't think we can go down that route, and that's kind of what my guys were saying. If we have the demand, we wanna be able to fill it.
I understand. I'm trying my peripheral to see here. I'm gonna go back down the line here. Nikki?
I think there's a difference between, you know, refilling than, I think what we're trying to stop is the expectation that our people will do everything an employee would do 24/7. Because we deliver the product, we make sure that it's taken out to the floor in some cases, put on the initial shelf, put the shelf talkers up. But there are cases where we are told, you know what, unless you're here moving those bottles to the front and making sure there's more product out there all the time, that the area is perfectly clean, that the displays are continually kept up, you don't do it, we're not doing it either. And there comes a time when you're crossing that line between you're actually, whose employee are you? There are reasonable things that employees in the retail store should be doing, as opposed to having to have the wholesaler come in and do it, and we're just trying to find that balance.
I'm with you, Jim.
I think the best way, from my perspective, is probably the best way to start this would be by defining what is and is not acceptable. And not deal with the issue of frequency, and see if that in fact takes care of the abuses that are real or perceived. That's number one. Number two is, I've gotta speak, cause I don't just speak for Applejack, I speak for other stores. There are a lot of stores out there that have satellite warehouses. I don't disagree with Mickey that maybe for far away sites that you can't move product back and forth. Right now, a wholesaler can move product from your on-site warehouse to the floor, et cetera, and do all the things they need to do. I think maybe what you wanna do is say, yes.
Say what now?
So if I have a warehouse that's 5 miles away, when they drop it off, that's the end of it. I don't have a problem with that. I think for some of the smaller retailers or some other retailers, small or large, doesn't matter, who may have a warehouse right near their existing store.
You can't do that today, though, it's illegal.
Today you can't do it, but maybe put a radius restriction that as long as that extra warehouse is within 1,500 feet, then it's doable. I just don't wanna stop the little guy who's got no room in their storefront from not being able to get stuff from those satellite warehouses that's 400 feet away.
Well, but then you come, you know, we have to deliver to a location. Now what you're saying is you can deliver to a location 400, 500, 1,000 feet away, and then when we want it, you have to come back and pick it up from there and bring it to the store. I think that's not reasonable.
Again, I don't disagree with you that it's not reasonable if you say we want it and we need to bring it over. I think your ability to do it, if you choose to, should be there. But it's not a huge deal.
Thanks for clarifying that, yeah, 'cause you can't do it today, and with what's going on here, I'm not sure if I'd be comfortable opening that door with all the other issues we have to do with value of labor. That just adds another element to the value of labor, is the value of labor, what the distance is. And I think drop off and go on that situation, I think is appropriate. So you had another comment?
Well, my only point to you would be, if it's drop and go for them, for the warehouse, what does it matter where the warehouse is, as long as it's close enough? Just a point.
Drop and go is different than having to
No, I
drop
agree.
and go and then come back and pick up and
Right.
stock and.
So,
Sure.
I mean, I think, of course, we wanna start with what the feds allow. I think Mickey's brought up some really legitimate issues, so there may be a way to try to define it, but I don't wanna just commit to saying, yeah, let's define it and say that that's good until we know where we end up on the definitions, of course. But I think that might be the best way to do it.
Okay.
And the frequency thing, I think, does get very problematic, because then you're really interfering in how various businesses work and when they're in order and how all that works. So I think that probably isn't the problem as much as what's being required of them, so.
Okay. Is I done here, or is it more hands up? No? Larry?
I think certainly, as I always agree with Jim, and certainly Ms. McAvoy on a number of issues, coming up with this clear definition, I think would be a good start to relieving some of the initial problems that Mickey's kind of highlighted, and a number of folks have highlighted that have happened in retailers. A lot of what we've seen in the Ohio regulations and some of the regulations, and certainly what I've looked at in Safeway's, their labor agreements as it relates to delivery of other products, non-alcohol products, there's definitions of what the store employee can and can't do and what the supplier can and can't do. And then from there, there's a lot of sort of maze and permissible language that allows the retailer and the distributor to kind of work out, you know, once you have the definition, then they're able to kind of work out frequency in making sure both parties understand through the definitional change what they can and can't do. And if there is some, and I think Stephen mentioned this, some leeway about, well, maybe the distributor needs to come in, there's a broken bottle or something, and typically in the past has cleaned it up. Now that you have a rule that says there's prohibitions versus definitions, there's gonna be a lot of finger pointing, or things aren't gonna get resolved, I think, in the future. So I think, to me, if there's, at least from Safeway and the retailer side, coming up with those definitions first on merchandising, stocking, and some of the other issues, and then working in kind of a permissive way, kind of, I think, as Jim highlighted, may be a good first step in starting to resolve what is out there.
I think we've also decided, we talked about last time about the on-site sales promotions. It's a little bit different thing, but still is something, that thing needs to be folded in here as well, where we decided to go ahead and give some definition. There's a definition already of what it is already in the rules, but how it applies to this, I think, needs to be brought into the fold, so we're gonna add that. Who's?
Me? Yeah. Patrick, I agree with everybody. I think that one thing to think about is the frequency based on a lot of different factors, really becomes a business decision instead of a regulatory decision, is based on size, popularity of the brand, days of the week, and when they're open, not open, hours to sell, all of that, and it kind of becomes a business decision, whereas the scope, brings you more in focus to the role, or the independence of each individual tier. I think we all kind of have a pretty good idea of what each individual tier's role is, and then that tends to bring it closer to focus on what is allowable and not.
Patrick,
Yes.
did I hear you correctly, so I don't miswrite it down, that you want to or are thinking about folding in, you called it site sampling?
On-site sales
On-site
promotions?
sampling into the merchandising area?
No,
Or
I
is
mean,
it
what I mean by that is folded in to this discussion
Okay.
of what it is and how it plays a role in the value of labor.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Because right now, the on-site sales promotion, which is covered under the trade practice regulation, talks about what a supplier, wholesaler can do at a on-site sales promotion, okay? And I think since it is actually you're physically there on the premises, we need to address it, how it relates to any kind of value of labor. Because if you're there doing an on-site sales promotion, giving away trinkets of your brand, and then you're asked to do something other than that, you know what I mean? So I wanna make sure that we're clear with that as well.
Would it not, though, fall into the building the brand concept?
I mean,
that you're
again,
talking about?
it does, I think, I mean, since it's a physical appearance by the wholesaler supplier at the retailer, I think we don't wanna just leave it alone and not mention it. Cause I think, like hypothetically, if, the situation where, if it did, I'm not sure it happens out there, but Mickey mentioned about some retailers requiring you to be so many days a week to do stocking. Well, what if they ask you or require you so many days a week to do on-site sales promotions? That kind of thing, is that an issue? Cause that's never been addressed. Like again, I haven't necessarily come across that necessarily, but I wanna make sure we don't miss it. I don't wanna just ignore because we haven't talked about it. And Jim's giving me that puzzling look.
Yeah, I mean, I've never, it's one of those things, if we haven't heard about it in place, I mean, you hear about everything. So.
And the on-site self-promotion also is somewhat of the branding, like retailers want to use 7 days a week, selling the product down the floor, soliciting customers and does that occur as a demand function or a requirement function, not necessarily that the activity itself is an issue, but it's demanding that activity. That's what I wanna make sure we're not missing.
And also the market, to put it in perspective, the market's changing dramatically, as we all know, and one of the ways it's changing is, one of the ways that it was, is there were a lot of big wholesalers in this market, and wholesaler A was worried that if they don't do something, and wholesaler B would do it, they'd be at a disadvantage. And the world is probably gonna change in Colorado very soon, which is there's gonna go from 3 big wholesalers down to 2. And that changes the dynamics of some retailer dictating to those wholesalers what they expect, because that fear factor of losing business is gonna go away.
Andres?
Just to kind of add on a little bit to those comments too, as well as this gentleman's comments before about frequency being a business decision. Honestly, in other states, for craft brewery brethren out there that have worked in other states, the frequency has been one of the issues that has shut us out from a lot of those markets, just because of those, either stated or unstated expectations coming in. I personally view it as a sliding scale. The more that you define what activities are permitted or not permitted, the less of a need there is to define the frequency, just because we'll be able to actually understand what exactly is or is not expected. Our biggest fear is that day one, we have double the number of retailers, and instead of having double the number of expectations to be there for self-distributing manufacturing breweries, we have much more of a requirement in these new retailers. So from my perspective, to think about these types of issues, the frequency piece needs to be considered, but I think it needs to be considered only after we've basically come up with some really great definitions that are based upon what we've seen in terms of the abuses or the issues that are out there, seeing if that works for the group, and then moving forward to the discussion at that point. I think you're on the right track.
I saw another hand, is that Eugene?
Am I correct in the assumption, or that some of the on-site promotion is done by contracted entities, and it's not necessarily the wholesaler's employee, but someone or supplier's employee, it's someone they have contracted to do?
Yeah. Mhm.
So we wanna make sure that that's part of the value
Yeah.
of labor
Well, absolutely, yeah, well, it
Alright,
sort of
I
already,
just don't
it
wanna
already is, through some of the trade practice regs where you can't use a third-party contractor to fulfill those, things that you can't as a wholesaler. I'm not saying things you can do, but there is language that we will.
brand ambassadors. I think that's-
So our commitment to you is to get some draft regs, definitions, no later than next Friday. I'll say next week, but I always want Friday to be included in next week, so I'll take as long as I can. But, hopefully sooner, but definitely by next Friday, and that'll give us a few days to look at before our next meeting in August, trade practices, okay? I really appreciate everybody's, I think we're starting to get the train running here as far as getting ideas and information out there. I think the initial shock is over, and I think we're trying to get I think we're getting some good traction here where we're gonna get to, so, I'm not gonna say I'm excited, but I'm encouraged. Anything else you wanna discuss before we go on to the next subgroup, anybody, on trade practices? Okay. The next one was deliveries. So as we know, in January, the laws on deliveries changed, or will change, I should say. And in addition to the laws changing on deliveries, the division is, prior to the law change, decided to undertake creating an actual paper permit for delivery processes for those entities able to deliver. At that point in January, it'll be your retail liquor stores, your liquor licensed drugstores, and your for minimum beverage off-premise retailers will be able to deliver. So we're developing a rule to give guidelines on the application process, what it looks like, information you have to provide. And I'll have a little bit of merit of the statute in there as far as some of the limitations of your gross sales. We'll also give approval process. And then if you have any changes to that agreements, if you have other companies like an ordering service, what it would take to get changes to that agreement to continue delivering. So really, it's just a rule to help shepherd in the process of actually getting a piece of paper hanging on your wall saying, I can deliver. Now, it used to be that way umpteen years ago, until I know early 2000s when the division took the stance of if you have a license that can deliver, you can deliver without getting actually an approval. So we're going back to that approval process. We had some really good discussion, including, Nidhi from Instacart, I can't say that, I didn't say that, did I? Whew, sorry. Drizzly, sorry Nidhi, from Drizzly, I know she's not here, but if she ever listens, from Drizzly, attended, and, Drizzly's one of the foremost ordering services in the country, if not Colorado. So we had a lot of good input from her as far as how their process works and how they can fold into this. So I think we're making some headway on drafting the regs again, by next Friday, get them out to you to give guidelines on how that process is gonna take place. Are there any questions or comments or additional to that, to the delivery subgroup, those of you who were there?
I was wondering if the local licensing authorities will have any part in the approval or application process for deliveries?
Absolutely not.
At this point, that is, Christian, you're part of the working group here, has not been contemplated, having local approval. And a lot of it's because of, they're delivering probably outside the city or county, and the logistical process of involving two-step process versus one. It's always been a one-step plus only allows state licensing authority to give them out local licensing authorities. So I'll be willing to listen to your ideas as far as how that could be done, but without a law change and with a lot more work, I'm not sure if that will be a part of the process. Gene?
It would be an absolute nightmare for some of the bigger retailers who probably deliver statewide to have to license up.
Right.
apply in every, 65 counties, something like that, or 260-some unis.
Right, so that's one of the reasons why it's, state only.
Yeah. And does
As
the
a-
statute say it's state only?
Statute says the state licensing authority will provide those. And one thing we can do is, we can, probably a prudent idea to have some mechanism post on our website, a listing of those that have the ability to deliver. I think that'd be a good thing, that way that we're transparent with the public and all licensees. This is the list of those retail liquor stores or liquor license drugstores, FMBs that have obtained a delivery permit. That's a sundry list of things we already put on our internet right now, or on our website, I should say, of all the different kind of license types. We'll just add that to it. Okay. Yes, sir.
Yes, just a question, and apologize, I wasn't at the delivery meetings yet, and I'm sort of straying off into the retail liquor store space with this question. But has there been any discussion about the impact on the on-site, off-site rule that was put in place, and the impact that would have on existing businesses versus upcoming businesses?
Are you talking about the 3-2% on-off license change?
No, I'm talking about the delivery percentage, where you have to have a certain percentage of on-site sales compared to your off-site or delivery sales.
We haven't talked a whole lot about that in the subgroup. Law change will come in January to where no more than 50% of your total alcohol sales can be from delivery. So you have to have more than 50% from your store, brick and mortar store.
That's the exact rule, and I'm aware of at least one business that will be pretty dramatically impacted by that rule. So I was wondering if there's been any discussion
That's
about
not a rule,
lowering
it's a statute.
the size before it becomes a problem or anything like that.
They're having, because it's actually a law, and we can't change the law here. We can just implement the law by rules. So it's a law change.
From the retail liquor store side, are you aware of the people who are gonna be impacted by this? Some businesses are in trouble. Craft Alley's the one that comes to mind.
He was here at the last.
Yeah,
at
right,
the
just like
delivery
one of
meeting.
the last meetings, but, their delivery model is to deliver growlers of beer, and their on-site presence is currently a fraction of their total footprint. So it's a serious problem with them.
Yeah, I will tell you that, we've thought about that and actually have had a discussion with some people about it, and the problem is that it's statutory. And there's nothing that liquor enforcement can do in terms of the rules and regulations for it. It has to be a legislative change. And, it's an interesting discussion point going forward, maybe.
Okay. Any questions from working group on deliveries? Okay, great. Next, I'm gonna hand it over to Jake Baus here, who co-chaired both the lodging entertainment and the statutory changes subgroup, and have him give you an update with where we are with those.
With lodging and entertainment, last week, Monday, we circulated the draft that we had come up internally with. I felt pretty consistent with some of the industry discussion that we had about a month ago, and just trying to put some teeth to this so that we're all reading from the same sheet of music when it comes to how we're issuing these licenses consistently. And there was quite a bit of conversation about just not poking holes, but just asking questions to make sure that if we are making licensing decisions based on the information put forth before us, if we would be consistent. And I think part of the reason for that is just the nature of defining what this is. So we passed around the language last week. It should have been sent to everyone's inbox, and I don't know if you've got it in front of you, but some of the overarching things that the rule accomplishes is defining what entertainment is versus what entertainment is not, which is kind of a trippy thing to wrap your head around. But and in order to kind of paint with a broad brush and not be so exclusive so as to shortchange any business idea or entertainment idea that we haven't contemplated yet, we tried to define it broadly and set some parameters so that when a licensing authority, either local or state, receives an application, they should be able to determine whether or not it passes, whether it's entertainment or not. And some of the concerns we had was just we give some examples of what entertainment is, but we only give a handful of what entertainment is, just a handful of examples. And I think one of the concerns was we could keep elaborating upon that list, but I think therein lies the problem of we could of course just keep going and going, but we really just want this regulation to be illustrative of the types of businesses, and trust that through education with the local licensing authorities, or just communication with the local licensing authorities and with our staff, we're establishing clear parameters as to the types of businesses that would qualify. And I think we came to a pretty good consensus in that working group that's a workable model for now. Obviously, we're going to get not obscure, but just entertainment facility types that we haven't contemplated, and we might have to hold hands and talk through it. We certainly anticipate that this won't make the problem go away, but I think all we're really trying to accomplish with this rule is to kind of cut the fat and make sure that maybe with this rule we can provide some guidance so that there's a common understanding, so that most applications go through faster with this set of parameters, and if there is something that's a little novel, that we'll focus on those odds and ends as opposed to all of them. So we had a good conversation about that, and I think the subgroup was pretty pleased with the language. The other overarching topics that we discussed that the bill addresses are even if it may be perceived as an entertainment activity, if the activity itself creates involves the use of a deadly weapon, or creates a substantial health and safety risk to any person, that would prohibit the issuance of a lodging and entertainment license. And I think we're just trying to set an example that we don't. And the first one that comes to mind is just being able to have a cocktail in your hand while you're shooting a gun. And I think we're trying to keep an eye out for everyone. So I think that was pretty well received. There wasn't too much controversy regarding that. I think the language is pretty specific. It points to another statute under the Colorado Revised Statutes where you can learn more about deadly weapons and what they are and what our test is going to be there. And then finally, the rule, as we've drafted, is just puts a little color into the statute. The statute requires, for purposes of this license, that the primary purpose of your business must be the entertainment activity itself, or the sports activity itself. What we're trying to curb with that is not that we're issuing lodging and entertainment licenses that are pretexts for a different type of license that may be more appropriate. So by rule, we just wrote some language down that said to demonstrate that entertainment, that foosball is the primary purpose of your business, you would have to be able to demonstrate through documentation or receipts that you generate at least, your income from foosball must exceed 50% of your total annual gross sales revenue. And that's just a way to make it enforceable on our end so that we can point to something and we can set a clear expectation as to what we mean by primary purpose of your business. So that was pretty much it, and I think we had good conversation, but I don't think there was anything too objectionable. I think we allocated more working group meetings for lodging and entertainment rule, but given the discussion, and I think we're actually at an okay place where we're probably going to stop having working groups on lodging and entertainment, because I think all the issues have been circled. So my sense from the working group is that we'll just be ready to go when we actually have a rulemaking hearing, to discuss to discuss what we presented here. Are there any questions about Jess?
Yeah, I know it was brought up at the last meeting, about making sure that the definitions include, event centers, like
Mhm.
weddings and, bar mitzvahs and that type of stuff. You
Yeah.
guys looked into that more, or?
Talked about it a little bit internally.
Yeah.
I think our overarching concern with that at this point, and including something like an event center, is it's really kind of depends on the nature of what that event is. It's a little bit more fluid as opposed to, for whichever reason the person rents the event center space, then you're getting into the weeds of these types of events that are commonly held here are entertainment versus,